Welcome back to Billionaire Files. Today, we're not here to tell you another billionaire success story. No rise, no inspiration, no motivational headlines. Instead, we're stepping into the dark side of billionaires, a side most people were never supposed to see. A hidden world of power, silence, and protection, exposed through what the world now knows as the Epstein Files. While researching this story, I didn't feel shock. I didn't feel surprise. I felt something much heavier: discomfort. The kind of discomfort that stays with you even after you close the files, turn off the screen, and walk away. Because the deeper I went, the clearer it became that this story was never meant to be fully understood by the public. Not because the information does not exist, but because releasing all of it would shake the very structures that protect power. What you're about to hear is not a headline version of events. It's not a viral summary. It's not a fast-paced clip designed for social media. This is the long version, the version that takes time, the version that forces uncomfortable questions, and the version powerful people quietly hoped would fade away with time. And before you think, I already know this story, understand this. Most people only know the name Jeffrey Epstein. Very few understand the system that allowed him to exist, to operate, and ultimately to disappear without ever telling the full truth. Because this story is not just about one man, it is about access, influence, protection, and how secrets become the most valuable currency in the world. Before we go any further, one thing must be made clear. Some details come directly from court records, others come from sworn testimonies, some come from investigative journalists who spent years following this case, often at personal and professional risk. Not every detail can be publicly verified today, and that is not an accident. Many documents were sealed, destroyed, classified, or quietly buried. So instead of focusing on speculation, we focus on patterns, because patterns remain even when people lie. Jeffrey Epstein was not born into extreme wealth. He did not inherit billions. He did not build a famous corporation. He did not invent groundbreaking technology. He began his professional life as a math teacher, a normal job, a normal background. Nothing about his early life suggested global influence or elite power. And yet, somehow, Epstein made one of the most unlikely transitions imaginable, from teaching mathematics to managing money for some of the richest and most powerful individuals on Earth. This alone should raise serious questions. In elite finance, nobody rises by accident. Nobody manages billions without powerful sponsors. Someone always opens the door. So the first real question becomes unavoidable. Who opened that door for Epstein? By the 1990s, Epstein had something far more valuable than money. He had access. Access to private jets, access to private meetings, access to private spaces where no cameras and no reporters were allowed. He was not famous in the public sense, but he was known in the right rooms by the right people. Epstein understood something very early. Money buys comfort, but information buys power. When you know what powerful people do in private, you gain leverage over what they do in public, and leverage is everything. By the early 2000s, Epstein lived a lifestyle few could even imagine: multiple luxury mansions, a private Caribbean island, a fleet of aircraft, and above all, near total privacy. Or at least that's what everyone believed. But in 2005, the illusion began to crack. A minor filed a complaint with local police. She described being recruited under the promise of modeling work. She described being paid in cash. She described being taken to private residences where abuse occurred. At first, the complaint did not trigger serious action. It was treated as isolated, easy to dismiss. Then another girl came forward, then another, then another. Each account followed a strikingly similar pattern: recruitment, isolation, payment, abuse. The locations changed, but the structure did not. This was not random behavior. This was organized. As investigators slowly began to understand the scale, dozens of victims had already come forward, many of them underage. The evidence was extensive, the testimonies were consistent, the pattern was clear, and yet something unbelievable happened. Instead of facing decades in prison, Epstein received a deal so unusual that even experienced legal experts later admitted it was almost unheard of. 18 months, not in a standard prison environment, with extraordinary privileges, daily release, access to work, access to visitors, comfort. This was not justice. This was protection. And that leads to the most important question in this entire story: who was protecting Jeffrey Epstein? Because no individual receives that level of leniency without powerful backing. That kind of deal does not happen by accident. Investigators later revealed something deeply troubling. Whenever they attempted to expand the investigation, whenever they tried to question Epstein's associates, resistance appeared. Witnesses changed their stories. Evidence stalled. Pressure increased behind the scenes. In some cases, individuals connected to the case died. Sudden deaths, quiet deaths. Official explanations varied: heart attacks, suicides, overdoses. But the pattern was impossible to ignore. Attention then shifted towards Epstein's wider network, his private island, his jets, his guest lists, and what emerged was far more disturbing than individual abuse. This was not just exploitation, this was leverage. Victims later testified that hidden cameras were installed throughout Epstein's properties: bedrooms, bathrooms, private spaces. These were not rumors. These were sworn statements. Epstein was not just facilitating abuse, he was recording it, collecting evidence, storing secrets, building leverage, because secrets create control, and control creates power. By the time the public began to understand this reality, the system had already reacted. Media coverage softened, names were avoided, lawsuits were settled quietly, and slowly the story began to fade. Until 2019, public pressure exploded. Social media refused to let the case disappear. Journalists reopened old investigations. Authorities were forced to act. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested again. This time, the world believed justice would finally happen. Epstein was placed in one of the most secure detention facilities in the country. Surveillance, guards, protocols, no excuses. And then the unthinkable happened. Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell. Officials immediately ruled it a suicide, but almost instantly the story began to fall apart. Cameras malfunctioned, guards were asleep, records were incomplete, medical reports raised serious questions: broken bones, unusual injuries, and one missing minute of surveillance footage. A single minute that changed everything. Coincidence or something else? The timing was impossible to ignore. Epstein was preparing to face trial. He was preparing to testify. He was preparing to name names. And then silence. Dead men do not testify. After Epstein's death, authorities seized massive amounts of digital evidence, hard drives, phones, servers. They promised transparency, they promised accountability, they promised the full truth. But instead, the opposite happened. Files were sealed, names were redacted, evidence was classified. When some documents were released, faces were blurred, key details were removed. Why? Because exposing the full truth would not only destroy individuals, it would destabilize institutions, governments, corporations, foundations, power structures built on reputation and silence. Some victims attempted to speak publicly, others accepted settlements, quiet money, quiet endings, and slowly public attention moved on. But here is the truth most people avoid. Epstein did not operate alone. No network this scale revolves around one person. There were recruiters, facilitators, fixers, protectors, and enormous financial backing. Epstein's Island was not simply a vacation destination. It was a controlled environment, private airspace, private docks, no oversight. Visitors arrived by private jet, no customs, no records. Inside, everything was monitored. This was not chaos, this was structure. Victims later described identical experiences, same rooms, same procedures, same silence afterward, which tells us one thing very clearly. This system was designed, and systems like this do not disappear overnight. When Epstein died, the network did not vanish. It adapted. Silence became strategy. Delay became weapon. Time became shield. Years passed. New scandals replaced old ones, and justice quietly slipped away. Yet unanswered questions remain. Why were so many documents sealed? Why were names protected? Why were investigations quietly stopped? Because exposing the truth would not simply punish criminals, it would threaten power itself, and power always chooses survival. This was never just a criminal case. It was a threat to deeply entrenched systems, and systems protect themselves at all costs. Today, years later, the Epstein case remains unfinished, not because answers do not exist, but because those answers are dangerous. Dangerous to reputations, dangerous to governments, dangerous to institutions that depend on public trust. Many victims never saw justice. Many names were never revealed. Many stories were never heard. And that silence is not accidental. Transparency was promised, but transparency never came. Instead, the public received fragments, enough truth to calm outrage, not enough truth to force accountability. This is how power survives, by revealing just enough and hiding the rest. Epstein was not the system. He was a visible part of it, careless, expendable, replaceable. The system continues. So the real question is not how Epstein died. The real question is how many others are still operating, how many victims remain silent, how many secrets remain buried. Because networks like this do not disappear. They evolve. They change names. They change locations. They adapt. And silence allows them to survive. This story is not meant to scare you. It is meant to warn you. Because when power operates without accountability, abuse becomes inevitable. And when abuse is protected, truth becomes dangerous. If you have listened this far, understand this. Awareness is the first threat to power. Questions are the second. silence is their shield. So do not stop questioning, do not accept incomplete answers, and do not assume justice always wins, because history teaches us one uncomfortable truth: justice only happens when people refuse to forget. Stay aware, stay questioning, because silence protects power. If you found this Epstein Files video eye-opening, smash that like, share it with everyone, and subscribe to stay in the loop. And guess what? We could turn this into a full series, bringing you every new update as it drops. So make sure to hit that bell icon. Don't miss a single shocking detail.